Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Chris Gilbert, today filming from PwC's TMT Senior Tax Executive Roundtable. With me today to talk a little bit about some of the key highlights and takeaways is Ty Kanaaneh. Ty, welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. It's nice to have you. Thank you. This TMT conference, we always have a relatively robust agenda and a great group of senior tax executives from some of our premier clients here in California. What are some of the key highlights coming out of this conference today?
What I'm taking from the conference, the big picture is everybody's being attacked from all sides. They're getting hit from slowing economy, right? We're seeing a lot of layoffs in tech. They're getting hit with smaller budgets but greater regulation. The complexity of the world and the controversy for tax executives is increasing exponentially. Tax authorities are looking for more paydays, not less. And there's not the paydays they're expecting. So there's a lot of tension in the system. Add to that the geopolitical tensions that are coming out. It is not an enviable position to be a tax executive right now from that lens. They're very busy, they're very stressed, and they're very eager to hear from each other. Well, what are you doing? We have a great deal of engagement, and it's just to be technically accurate. It's not just from California. We have from all over the country, and especially in the telecom space, we have a lot of people from outside of California.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And it's hard to imagine we're in a space where there's been any less of competing demands across a tax executive's career, right? We look at it today, and there are a number of things that are coming together. And then you really layer pillar two across the top of that, right? And so all the things that you articulated and you think about it from those angles, it's really hard to kind of imagine a scenario where there's been any less from a competing demands perspective. So when we think about that, like what are we hearing from our clients and our companies right now as we think about those different competing demands?
What we're hearing is they are trying their best to balance all these competing demands, specifically with the tax legislation and the inability in the U.S., for example, to produce something in the way of new laws that are compliant with global tax policy or Pillar 2. You mentioned some degree of anxiety about we the U.S. pushed the world to go in this, the OECD to go in this direction, but we, the U.S., are not yet delivering. So there is a bit of a theme of the U.S. is a big part of the instability in the tax world. And so we're part of the problem, not necessarily part of the solution holistically.
Right. Well, and I think you look at that, and what we've heard a lot too on top of that, right, is you look at it today, obviously there's the workforce issues that you mentioned early on. They look at it at a time where you have kind of what I would say is this uncertainty from a U.S. policy perspective, but also at the global policy. And we're at a point where you look at the next several years and what they potentially have to stand up from an overall compliance or reporting perspective. And it's a daunting task, right? And I think that's a number of companies, right, are really starting to think through how to get those things done as well. So if we step back and think about, obviously we've talked about a number of these different things. What should companies really be thinking about as they kind of move forward?
What strikes me is there's so much happening. Right? I've already said that. I think the best advice I've heard from some of the tax executives is that focus on the things you do control. You just touched on it, data. You're going to need data. You're going to need it spliced in the right way, and you're going to need access to it very easily. And so to the extent you are budgeting investments in IT or budgeting investments in whatever, that's where you want to put the resources. That's the easy button. The less easy button is and a little bit more academic, which is you got to be flexible. You're going to want to be nimble. So I don't know how you build in nimbleness, but into your organization, that's going to be critical. You're going to have to pivot away from things that have been long standard practices in the tax world. You may have to just do it completely differently. It used to be, in retrospect, we now look back and it was like, wow, that seemed really simple. The quaint days of, it used to be for tech clients especially, it was an easy play. Yeah, align your IP with whatever jurisdiction outside the U.S., and that is a more favorable. You get some treaty protections. You get a more favorable tax rate. You save on the rate arbitrage. Pillar 2 is going to make that much more complicated. It's already been really difficult to keep your IP outside the U.S. Several of our clients have already brought their IP back to the U.S. after TCJA. So there is a complete diversification of the group. It's no longer one fact pattern fits all.
Well, and some of that, right, is just an evaluation by the business or the company themselves to think about, collectively what their new business strategy should be in light of overall global policy, geopolitical risk, et cetera, right? And as you kind of look at that, what you just described at some level, right, is tax really aligning with where the business is to help de-risk the business at some level, right? And make sure that our tax policy is in line with the overall business strategy as a whole, right? And so companies are real doing it. The other thing I would point out too here that you just mentioned, the data is a massive component of what's coming with respect to a lot of these companies, right? And I think it's fair to assume that just because you're in tech doesn't mean that you have a handle on your data, right? Just you're in kind of the same boat that a lot of other companies are.
That's right.
As they kind of look at it. So it has been a big focus and definitely is something that I think, we've talked a lot about at this conference with our clients.
That's fair. I think the added stress for the tech sector is they have a big target on their back. Pillar 2 is, I think, in Pillar 1 especially, is very much targeted after large U.S. multinationals, namely, large tech clients. And so, yeah, they have that added stress in addition to all the normal problems that all the sector have. They've grown. The data systems, the ERPs haven't grown as fast as the business has grown. They've acquired companies. It's messy like anybody else, like any mature business. And we have a lot more mature businesses in the tech sector now. So that's all the above plus is the point.
I think that's right. So, well, Ty, thank you very much for joining us today. The conference has been great. Obviously, clients have enjoyed it quite a bit as well. So thank you. And as always, thank you for joining us on Policy on Demand.